What is poppin', YouTube? Back with an actual full-length video. We haven't made one in a long time, so dropping off. We have been live streaming a lot, so that's gonna be my excuse, but no excuse here today. We're walking through my top 10 running backs for redraft, so that is what we're gonna get into today. If you have not already subscribed to the channel, what are you doing with your life? Join the Caleb Neeme fam. We are trying to get to 50 subscribers by the start of the season. We are like 8 or 10 away, something like that. So please subscribe as we continue to grind into this redraft season. And of course, without further ado, we are going to get into the intro. Of course, we just put together that new intro video, so totally let me know what you think about that as we, I got a few different options, so you'll be seeing those over the next few weeks. We are doing this one take Drake style, so if you hear the if you hear everything like that, I don't care. We're trying to put out quality content for you guys. But without further ado, my running back one for redraft this year is going to be Christian McCaffrey. Now, I know what you're saying. Christian McCaffrey, isn't he injury prone? Why are you putting Christian McCaffrey over Jonathan Taylor? I think the main reason I'm putting Christian McCaffrey over Jonathan Taylor is the fact that Christian McCaffrey on a points per game basis, 27 points per game, 30 points per game, that's game winning weeks for you. And if you can get 8 to 10 weeks of that, that is really going to propel your team to going to the playoffs. And that's what we're trying to do. As long as we can get into the playoffs, then we can kind of figure out everything after that. And now I know Christian McCaffrey is getting up there in age. There's a lot to be said about, how we were looking at Christian McCaffrey and everything like that. Pulled up player profiler for you just to kind of walk through a little bit. So if we look, of course, he had the 18.2 fantasy points per game last season, even though he only played 7 games, only played 3 games the game before, but averaged 30.1 fantasy points per game. And back in 2019, averaged 29.3 fantasy points per game. And he played a full 16 weeks. Now, that is a little bit interesting when we consider the fact that what's going to be happening, how are they going to use them? That's the kind of game record that I want in my RB1 spot if I have the 101 overall. And so that is why I'm drafting Christian McCaffrey. I think Jonathan Taylor might regress a little bit. And Alex Crusoe, he's on Twitter. He posted maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago talking about how there has not been an RB to repeat as the RB1 since 2007. I think it was LaDainian Tomlinson went back to back. So I'm just going to say this, I'm just playing the variable, going with Christian McCaffrey. Let me know in the comments if you disagree with that. My RB2 is going to be, of course, Jonathan Taylor. Now, Jonathan Taylor, there's a lot that can be said about Jonathan Taylor. They add Matt Ryan this year to the Colts. The offensive line is still solid. Michael Pittman is having a lot of hype in camp. But Jonathan Taylor, we all know what he did last year, was the RB1. He averaged 21.9 fantasy points per game on a points per game basis. And he's just going to continue to get the rock. 17 games played last year, had 332 rush attempts, 1,800 yards. I don't think there's anything crazy about what he was doing. The main reason, though, why he was the RB1 is because he played all 17 games. He did play 15 games in 2020, so he has proven up to this point that he's durable. But we do know with the running back position, injuries, you can't really predict them because running backs are getting hit. They're in between the tackles. And nothing bad to say about Jonathan Taylor. I just am banking my projection on, I think Christian McCaffrey has the higher upside, and that is why I'm taking Christian McCaffrey 101 over Jonathan Taylor. Nothing wrong with Jonathan Taylor at all, but I think solid option if you get him. I know most people will be taking him 101 in their home redraft leagues or even playing with a little bit more competitive players, but I am taking Christian McCaffrey. That is my thoughts. My RB3 is going to be Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, of course, had the major injury last year to his foot. A lot of people are off him and are he's old. What's going to be happening with him as we go into this year? He is, 28.6. He's going to be turning 29 towards the end of the season. The thing that we have to remember about Derrick Henry is even though he did only play 8 games last year, even in those 8 games, he was still averaging 24.2 fantasy points per game. So if we look at it right here, we will see that he was, yes, of course, averaging 24.2 fantasy points per game, which was more than Jonathan Taylor on a points per game basis. And that's the kind of stuff that I am trying to look at when I'm going for these high upside guys. Of course, what happened to the Titans offense? They got rid of they got rid of AJ Brown. They're bringing in Treylon Burks. Robert Woods is there. The offense is probably not going to be as great. And I imagine they're not going to win as many games. They're probably going to be somewhere in the 8 to 10, flirting with the 8 to 10 win category. They're going to be down a lot. So maybe Derrick Henry doesn't get the 378 attempts, the 300 attempts that we're accustomed to. But maybe he gets around 260, 270, and that's still going to be enough for a guy like him to end up with 10 touchdowns, 10 to 12, 13 touchdowns. and just be an absolute stud for you on your fantasy football team. So that is why I have him as my RB3. Let me know in the comments, are you off Derrick Henry? Is he too old? Are the injuries there? Let me know. Dalvin Cook is going to be my running back 4. Dalvin Cook, they added the new offensive coordinator. They brought in the Rams guy. So they are going to be throwing the ball a little bit more. And what's that going to do? That's really going to open the field up for Dalvin Cook. Now, of course, Dalvin Cook is no stranger to injuries himself, but last year he did only play 13 games. So a lot of these things with these running backs, you got to think, I might only be getting 12 to 13 weeks out of them, but if those 12 to 13 weeks are elite, then that is exactly what we want. And this Dalvin Cook's like a CMC like light version is how I kind of view Dalvin Cook. If we look at the way that he has been going on, of course, on Player Profiler, we can tell that last year he averaged 15.9 fantasy points per game, which put him as the RB9 on a fantasy points per game basis. The year before that was at 24.1. And now, when we looked at what happened last year, of course, only played 13 games. He had 249 rush attempts, which is way lower than what he had in 2020 when he had 312. It was averaging 24.1 fantasy points per game. He did kind of, even when he did play, was a little bit banged up, had 1,159 rushing yards and 6 total touchdowns. I think when we look at what's going to be happening this year, it's going to be hard for us to really project what the offense is going to look like because it's going to be a completely new offense. I know Justin Jefferson is saying that he can totally see why Cooper Kupp was open. So maybe they are going to absolutely throw the ball, and maybe Kirk Cousins is going to be a great late round value for you in your fantasy football drafts. But of course, we've seen Dalvin Cook. We know the elite upside he has to win you weeks. And so that is why I have him at RB4. But I will say it was really tight between Dalvin Cook at RB4 and then my RB5, which is going to be Joe Mixon. Now, I know I am a Bengals homer, so maybe Joe Mixon is a little bit higher. Why am I so high on Joe Mixon? Well, for one, we did just go to the Super Bowl. Who them dogs, Bengals, go Bengals. But and we have Joe Burrow. We have the awesome passing attack. But why is Joe Mixon? Why do I think he has even more upside than what he had last year? Because last year, if we look at the way that he was playing, of course, he was playing at an 18 points per game basis, was the RB5 on a points per game basis, had 16 total touchdowns, 292 rushing yards for 1,205 yards. The thing that I have to remember about the way, so he did play all 16 games. I know the year before that he had injuries, so he only played 6. They are going to be in a lot. The offense is getting more efficient. They added all the offensive linemen there for Cincinnati, and Joe Burrow is going to have more time to throw. They're going to be in more scoring opportunities. Of course, it means more touchdowns for the receivers, but it also means more touchdowns for Joe Mixon. I know there has been rumors, he doesn't get the receiving work. He did have 42 receptions last year, and I don't imagine that I imagine he stays around that same. So if he is going to be the RB5 on a points per game basis, I think this is an absolute great way where you have kind of a floor that we have seen where it's, somewhere between 14 to 18 points per game, but then you do have that high end upside. I think you could maybe even hit that 20 points per game mark. And as your RB5, that is kind of what we are leaning for here. I know a lot of people would probably have my next guy on the list, maybe above Joe Mixon, but let me know. How do you feel about Joe Mixon this year? I have a little bit of thoughts, and I am rambling, so we are going to keep this moving. I have Austin Ekeler as what is this? My 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, my RB6. So Austin Ekeler, of course, there's a lot to say about Austin Ekeler. They have the new offense. They don't have the new offense. I'm so sorry. I'm rambling and I'm overthinking what I'm saying. But Austin Ekeler produced last year. If we look exactly what he did last year, 21.5 fantasy points per game, had almost his best fantasy football season that he's had pretty much ever. But so they had 70 receptions for 647 yards, and he had 206 rushing attempts for 911 yards. The previous years, he had 116 rushing attempts and then 132 rushing attempts. Now, the big concern for me with Austin Ekeler and why I have him a little bit lower than consensus is going to just be the fact that they did draft Isaiah Spiller. They drafted Isaiah Spiller, and with Isaiah Spiller, I know he was a 4th round pick. I do know that, but I think there is going to be a level of they're going to be giving him a few more touches. And I think they see Austin Ekeler being age 27 season. He is going to start to decline, especially with him only being 5'8", 200. Now, has kind of overcome that scat back mentality. And so I think I'm not going to be getting a lot of Austin Ekeler in drafts because he is going to be going before Joe Mixon, maybe even before Dalvin Cook. And so I might be playing it a little bit more safe with Austin Ekeler. And so let me know. I might be too low on Austin Ekeler, but let me know. At my RB8, I have Najee Harris, and I did not even make a graphic for Najee Harris. So we are just going to be talking about Najee Harris. Of course, last year was playing with not even big arm Big Ben anymore. It was like noodle arm Big Ben. And so Najee Harris was absolutely demolishing with all the touches he had. If we look at Player Profiler, of course, was averaging 17.7 fantasy points per game, which put him as the RB6. He had 307 rushing attempts with 74 receptions for 467 yards. 74 that's like getting Alvin Kamara like numbers for your running back. And so that is why I'm a little bit off Najee Harris this year because, of course, depending on who the starting quarterback is, if it's Mitch Trubisky, if it's Kenny Pickett, they are not going to be checking the ball down enough to Najee Harris, especially with the weapons. You got Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and, of course, George Pickens. Preseason hype is all there. So, and they have Freiermuth at tight end. So I think it's the attempts might go down a little bit. The receptions might go down. I think based on his volume, he's going to be a really safe option for you. So as my RB7, I think he will be definitely safe, especially if you can get him in the back end of your first round draft. In your redraft leagues, I think that's great, especially if you can stack him with maybe one of these later guys. I think it's an absolute steal and starting your roster off strong. But it just kind of depends on how you like to build your roster. And so let me know, Najee Harris, you guys valuing him RB8. RB8? No, RB7. I said RB7. RB7. My RB8 is going to be Saquon Barkley. Now, Saquon Barkley, of course, is getting all the rumors. We've seen him have the full workload. He's kind of had injuries the last 2 years. Back in 2020, tore his ACL game 2 against the Chicago Bears. And then, of course, last year comes back, is getting ramped up back from being on that Achilles tear injury. And then, of course, steps on the Dallas Cowboys defender's foot and has a high ankle sprain that then kind of limited his ability last year. Now, if, of course, we go over here to Player Profiler, we will see that he averaged 11.4 fantasy points per game. Of course, only played 2 games in 2020, so we will discount that. But then in 2019, averaged 18.8 fantasy points per game, had 217 attempts, and had 52 receptions and 13 games. I think that is very similar to what we will be getting this year with Saquon Barkley because he did play 13 games last year. So he was on track with what he put up in 2019. The points per game numbers were just down. So what is there to look forward to in Saquon Barkley? Of course, they have the new coaching staff with Brian Dable. They do have the hopefully better offensive line. Daniel Jones still can't seem to hit the side of a barn when he throws. They don't have better receivers. So the whole offense is going to go through Saquon. And to be completely honest, I think Saquon's going to be the workhorse because it is his last year on his contract. And so the Giants really don't have any ties to him. So they're going to run him into the ground. And Saquon has a lot to prove. So he's going to want the rock. And so I think this is going to be a huge year for Saquon. And so that is why I'm taking him over maybe some other studs that might be a little bit later. And you might debate, hey, I don't want to have the risk that Saquon has. And I would totally hear you on that and understand that. But I am rolling with Saquon. I'm a Saquon believer. Same exact reason I have CMC as my 101. I am taking the high upside draft pick when I'm drafting, especially because you're getting Saquon in the early part of your second round draft when maybe you already took a Najee Harris or an Austin Ekeler or someone like that in the back end of your first round draft. Maybe not Austin Ekeler because I know he's going higher than consensus, but having 2 solid running backs that can then really hold your team down as you start that draft, and it's going to really help you in the end. My RB9 is going to be Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is getting kind of up there in age, but he's playing for the Packers. And it's really him, A.J. Dillon, and a lot of unknowns at the wide receiver position. Will Allen Lazard really take that next step? I don't know. When we look at Aaron Jones and kind of how he's produced on a year-by-year basis, we can just see that he last year averaged 15.3 fantasy points per game, which put him as the RB 11 on a points per game basis. He had 10 total touchdowns, 52 receptions for 391 yards, and 171 rushing attempts. I think this year, to be honest, I think both him and AJ Dillon both get about 200 carries. So I think he's going to be a little bit more like his 2020 season. But I think that 52 receptions number will actually get a lot higher this year. I think you're going to be looking at a receiver that running back that gets somewhere around 60 to 62 receptions. So I think the RB 8 to 9 on a points per game basis is where he's going to end up finishing out the year. And if you're getting that, of course, he's going to be right where his draft capital is. And so as long as he can stay healthy, he's going to really provide great value for you on your fantasy football teams. I really like Aaron Jones. We've seen what he's done. We've seen the way that he's been able to produce on a year-by-year basis. And so Aaron Jones is my RB9. Don't really have anything more to say about that. I've kind of been rambling. We're getting close to the 15-minute mark, and I appreciate everyone for here. So if you are still here, subscribe and like right now as we continue to figure out. And tomorrow we'll be dropping my RBs 11 through 20, but my RB10 is going to be Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams, of course, is playing in an upgraded offense. Russell Wilson comes into the town for Denver Broncos. You now have Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and Alberto, and KJ Hamler. I know Tim Patrick did tear his ACL, but the big report that came out was Melvin Gordon saying Vontae is the guy. Vontae is the one that they want getting all the carries. And so Javonte Williams is going to be getting a lot of the work. Of course, was a rookie last year, so he didn't necessarily have the strongest start to his season. So maybe your league mates are not going to be as high on Javonte as maybe some people that play a lot of dynasty fantasy football are. But here we go. Let's look at how he kind of performed last year. If we can see, he averaged 12.1 fantasy points per game, which put him as the RB22 as a rookie. Was not bad at all. Had played 17 games, 203 rushing attempts for 903 yards, 43 receptions, and 7 total touchdowns. So what can we take away from the way that things are looking here for Javonte? I think the big thing that we can take away is that there's a lot more opportunity for Javonte in this Denver Broncos offense with a little bit more efficient offense with Russell Wilson. The sky is the limit for the amount of touchdowns that he will be able to score. He's going to score a lot more than 7. I bet you he gets close to 10 to 12 this year, as well as I bet the rushing attempts go from 203 to 240, 250. That's not going to be really close. They're going to have a lot of leads. They are going to be playing in a high-powered AFC where they're going up against the Raiders, who upgraded their whole offense. They're going to be going up against the Chiefs, and they're going to be going up against the Chargers. 8 games out of the season, so they are going to be having to score a lot of points to be able to keep up. And so that's kind of my thoughts with Javonte. That is why I'm taking him over some other guys like a Lenny Fournette or like a Nick Chubb. I just think Javonte it's his time to break out. And so I'm really excited for Javonte this year. And yeah, that is why I have him as my RB10. So thanks so much for sticking around if you have this whole time. If you appreciate it, like and subscribe. Turn on that notification bell as we are dropping my RB 11 through 20 tomorrow. We will be diving a little bit more in. And of course, we are doing mock drafts every night. So like and subscribe. We will be going live almost every night doing a mock draft. So if you went in those mock drafts with me, like I said, leave a comment saying that you want in, leave your sleeper name, and I will try to get you in one of those mock drafts as we kind of prepare for your home drafts, or maybe you've already had your home drafts, but kind of seeing and growing together in fantasy because we want to win a lot of money. We want to win a lot of bragging rights. So thanks so much for sticking around, and I will catch you on